Hi there, my name is Anne. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek. We're in my home studio in Parker, Colorado, and I have a fun painting for us today to try. It is petting zoo season, or going to the zoo, or getting out and about and going to a farm and taking a tour. So I thought what we could do today is to paint a pig. Let's go give it a shot. Are you ready? Here we go. Well, here's our little guy. I had printed him out. I'll put the picture up for you so that you can see what we're dealing with. It's just a really happy looking pig. I like the way she was sitting, and I liked the way she was framed in the shot because I liked how it was kind of off to the right. But then when I drew her, I didn't like that there's all this white space. So that might change. Sometimes when you get a drawing down, things look a little different because you don't have that comparative background. But if you wanted to, you could do what I've done here and print it out in black and white, and then trace it by putting it up on your window, putting the paper over it, and going over the important lines. You could take this, put some graphite on the back, put it down over your paper, tape it in place, and then take some kind of a stylus or a pencil and draw around the important information. Or you could just draw it. It's not too difficult of a drawing. You just want to give yourself the important information. The paper that I'm using today is Legion Stonehenge. I've got a pad of it here, and I wanted to finish it up. I really like it. I don't like all of their paper, but I like this one. This one is a heavier paper. Their paper that is the 300 GSM, 140 pound, I have found that one to be very fragile, but I really like this one that's 600 GSM and 300 pound. It's the Legion Stonehenge Aqua Cold Press Heavy Paper. So the paints that I'm going to use today, I've already got it taped off as well. I think I started painting this the other day and then I got distracted. Shocker, I know. These are the Daniel Smith Colors of Inspiration. Now, when this set was new, it only had this top row in here, and I really love this set. I have added some paints in here that I really like. All of these are Daniel Smith, and they all granulate exceptionally well. I have a Holbein Ultramarine that I really love, and I've got another Ultramarine over here. These first four here are Mary Blue. I think the first thing we're going to do is just get this entire page wet. There's a couple of ways to do that. Here we go. I still have this. This is a little spray bottle, and I'm just going to spray the pig like so. And now I'm going to go in with a Mottler brush. You can use any brush that you want. And I'm just going to make sure that I've got this good and wet, and that all that water is kind of evenly distributed. I like working with the heavier watercolor paper as well because it's almost like having the watercolor paper and a board in one, because you get very little warping. You can work wet on wet. They really just work very well. Now, if you're wondering how wet to have your watercolor paper, you want it to have a sheen. Look at that, I missed this very center of her face. You want it to have a sheen and to be just about evenly distributed everywhere. You don't want any puddles anywhere. This is a Princeton Neptune, which is their faux squirrel. And what I'm going to mix for this pig is I'm going to go in and do a little bit. I'm going to work in these granulating colors. Now, I'll give you color alternatives in case you don't have these. A reddish brown. Now, what I'm doing is just putting in the first lines of our piggy. We don't have to have a whole lot of definition right now. I'm just looking for the darker portions of the pig. And I want this wet on wet because do you see how that's feathering out outside of the lines? That's what I want. I want the pig to be able to get the little hairs all over her without having to actually paint them in. And we'll go on this side as well. And then her nose would be a little bit darker right here. Just kind of lightly laying down some areas of brown. I think I need one more over here. There, now I'm going to go into a Quinacridone Rose, or you could use any kind of a light pink. And I'm going to mix it with a Cad Yellow medium. You could use Hansa Yellow, Lemon Yellow. I just want to make this a little more fleshy. And that is what we're going to use for her nose for the first wash. Now, all of these are just initial washes. We'll come back in and add detail later. And I think with that same little piggy color, we're going to go around her ears. Just being really loose at this point. And let's see, maybe around her eyelids and just under her eye. Mix a little of it in the snout, and we can fill some in up here on her back, because this will give us a nice cool gray. Do you see how that's turning just a little bit purple? And that's going to be a very nice cool gray for us. And with that one, we're going to start putting the shadows in for her nose, her ear, the darkest portions of the ear, and we can go ahead and get a little along her eyelid here. I don't want to do her whole eye yet, but along the eyelid would be fine. And then of course we can do her mouth, come up under here. And now with this darkest shade, we can also go in and darken up some of the darker areas of the pig. At this point, you're just establishing contour and form. Just kind of getting an out of focus picture of a pig. And now I need a little more color on her face. And this time I'll take that Quin Rose and add that to that. So now that's going to get a really nice rosy pink. And we're going to just fill that here on her sides. Little on her schnoz, and already my paper's getting dry, which is fine because we're just about done with this. I'm just taking a very watery mix of that one we just mixed. Now the light on our pig on the painting is coming from behind, so we're just going to make this a little more subtle lighting. I'm not going to worry about any kind of backlighting here. I'm just going to leave this like this for now. That's a good bit of speckle we've got going. That's dry enough. It's not bone dry, but it's dry enough. Now I'm going to go back and with my mottler brush, because I think I want to go ahead and add the background. If I decide I don't want this much space on the bottom, I can absolutely just trim it. So I'm starting over here where the most space is. If you don't have a mottler brush, you can use your largest round brush, or you could use a flat brush, like a stroke brush. I have to make a slight little correction here. I'm going to get some water up here, not too much, and then go back into this piggy shade and fill that in. Now this portion is all going to be wet on wet, and this time you do want the water to go over the part of the pig that bled in, and in fact you can even take it a little bit over the pig, the edge of the pig, because that way they can mix and mingle and we can really nestle that pig into her hay. There you go. And as long as you do it really lightly, you're not going to disturb that pigment underneath. It's kind of difficult to get a mottler brush into this pan this size. So one good tip I have for you is you can use a smaller brush, one that does fit into a half pan. And in this case, I really love this Serpentine green. So I'm going to go in here and I'll put that over here. And then of course you can just use what's on your brush. And now I'll go in with my mottler brush. I'm going to dip it in and now just pick up this pigment and just with very loose painterly strokes, I'm going to fill in that background. I'm intentionally leaving some white space. And now let's repeat that same process with, all right, we'll go in with the Mayan blue. And again with that same Cad yellow, we're looking for our next level of tone. Now this is the mid-level. Same thing, you're just going to daub it in really loosely, kind of coming close to the edge of the pig there. And now we can definitely make use of that Amethyst Genuine. And then let's mix that with some of this same Serpentine green. And that'll give us a nice olivey green. Isn't that lovely? And since this is our darkest green, this one we do want to bring right up to the edge of the pig. And now with this green over here that I've mixed, I'm going to add just a little bit of the Amethyst Genuine to that one as well, and we'll get a little cooler green added in. Trying to just tap this in because I want to keep that nature of the hay. I want to get into this Quin Gold, which is a lovely gold green. And let's add some of that. And let's see, I'm just going to tap it right along the edge of our little pig here to bring some warmth into that area. And that will be a very good background for us. So let's dry that part. So I think I am going to tape it down. Let's just take a moment and do that. Now here I don't need to worry about it being straight because I already have my, my edge taped off. This paper does come as a block, so you wouldn't even need to take it off at all. You could just leave it right on there. Let's focus back on our pig because now I think I want to repeat some of those same process. Go in with that first one that we did. Still using that Piemontite Genuine. And now remember, our entire painting is dry, so this whole section will be wet on dry unless noted otherwise. I'm using that number 8 round Princeton Neptune brush, and I just love how much liquid the belly holds. So you notice when I put that pigment down, I then went in and just got some water on my brush, and I'm just kind of spreading that pigment around. You can coax the pigment to move on your paper. You can really kind of control it and decide where you want to have that pigment go, because watercolor really does like to go wherever there's water. So I'm just kind of mixing more of these colors here, just trying to get more of that Piemontite Genuine and mixing just a little bit of that Alizarin Crimson in to just kind of give the next level of that the piggy tint that we created. And we'll just keep painting along. I really am repeating the steps that we did in the first part when we were working wet on wet. Just kind of going over the places of the pig where I've already blocked in some of that color and just kind of adding a very thin wash of another layer. And now I'm doing the same thing on the nose. And again, that's the cad yellow mixed with the Quinacridone rose. You can make that as coral or as pink as you like. You could even tip up the chroma a little bit and not add any yellow at all and give your piggy a bright pink nose. I really enjoy bringing the whatever it is you're painting, whatever your subject is, I enjoyed this phase because this is where we begin to bring it into focus. We begin to focus on the detail just a little bit, but we're not adding any definitive detail yet. So you'll see when I'm on the nose here, I've added the cleft in the middle of the nose, and now it's kind of wet on damp because you've already got a layer down, and I'm just tapping in the color, letting the watercolor go where I want it to go. The most effective way to do that is to place the pigment in the richest, darkest location on your subject and let it flow on your wet area around there. I'm taking some of that mix of the Ultramarine and the Piemontite, and I'm adding the gray to inside the nostrils. And then whenever I dab my brush on there like that and press down, that's a technique called lifting off. If you have too much pigment in one place or you want to create a highlight, you can definitely do that. Just get your brush wet, blot it off, and then press down on your paper or brush kind of firmly like I did right there around the snout. And you can just lift off some of that pigment, making it a bit lighter in that area. You may have heard me say, or you've heard other artists say it, but this is the time when your watercolor will go through an ugly phase. You're not putting in those final details to really make her look like a pig, but what you are doing is adding some more intense layers, some more intense washes. So right now, expect your painting to go through a really difficult phase. I like to call these the adolescent years. This is when your painting will frustrate you. Don't let that stop you, just keep going. In fact, I like to tell all of my students, whenever you're painting something and you get so frustrated with it, just walk away from it for a while, set it aside, come back to it later. It may just be that it's not done yet. It may just be that it's not complete. And as you can tell, that's where we are with this pig. I'm taking that Quinacridone rose and the cadmium yellow, and I've gone around the ears to just kind of block all of that in, and I'm just continually blending and softening those edges with a damp brush. And here you can see I've filled in a little bit more on the face, and now I've gone down to the nose, the snout rather, and I'm just putting in another layer. It's just the same process over and over again. I'm either working wet on dry or wet on damp, and the damp area would be if I took my brush, got it wet, and spread some water around, and then went back in and put some pigment in that. Or you can certainly put the pigment down and then get a wet brush and spread it to your liking. So I'm just kind of coaxing this pigment around, putting the shapes in and folds in this pig's body, trying to get her beautiful round self depicted on my paper the way that I want it to be. Now I have thoroughly dried my painting. And now I'm going in and focusing on the nostrils here. And you'll see I'm just using the very tip of my brush to tap in the very darkest areas on the nostrils, and that's toward the top. The color that I'm using is that same mix of the Piemontite Genuine and Ultramarine. If you don't have those two colors, like I mentioned earlier in some of the pop-up text, you can use Ultramarine and Burnt Sienna. That's a great way to create a gray or a brown. Any of those blues and browns that you have in your palette that tend to come with, I encourage you to play with them. Try mixing with Indigo and Burnt Umber. That might give you a brown, a gray that's more to your liking. Now what I'm doing is I'm going around with just a damp brush and softening that edge. That's another great technique for you to know as a watercolor artist, is softening the edge. I'm going in and trying to add the little details of all of the little creases in her skin around the nostril. And I'm just doing that with the very tip of the brush, just gently coaxing that softened pigment out into the pink. Now I've gotten her snout wet again, and I'm dropping in some more of the darker shade of the brown, or rather the Piemontite Genuine mixed with that Alizarin Crimson. Just trying to get a lot of the shading in her nose. I noticed that her nose is, of course, not clean. Pigs are supposed to be really clean animals, but to look at them, they look like they're dirty. I think it's because they like to lay around in the mud and run their noses under the hay, and so they pick up whatever it is that they find under there. And she certainly looks like she has had an eventful day and is experiencing a very well-earned nap. So I just kind of wanted to get some more texture in her nose, and that's a good way to do that, is to drop in some extra pigment. And now I'm going around on that curvature of her lip up there. She has some tissue that comes out of her lip like dogs do on their lips sometimes, where it's that really bumpy inner lip texture or a gum texture. I wanted to go ahead and add that on, so you'll see that coming in a bit here. But first, what I want to do is go in and glaze in another layer over those ears. I'm still using the Quinacridone and Cadmium Yellow mix, and you can see that ear on the right is just about complete, and I'm trying to do the same thing with this ear here. Just think about, when you're painting, think about the shape that the ear is. So you're always going to want to have your reference photo handy so that you can continually refer back to it. You're going to want to work as if the object you're painting is already three-dimensional. That may not make sense at first, but as you continue to paint and draw, it will make more sense. You want to be very conscious of the shapes, the shadows, the light and the dark. It's using our values that we can access as artists of shadow and light. That's what gives all of our objects form. Sometimes I'm very happy with the way that I use my shadow and light, and sometimes I'm not. I thought the pig turned out pretty well. So when you are, at least to my liking anyway, I think she has a lot of personality. That's what I look for when I paint animals. I don't look for realism, I look for personality, because I do love animals, and I always think that they have a thought in their head that they are trying to share with us. And I think her thought today is just that she is genuinely happy. So in using that shadow and light, I hope to convey that as an artist, and I think that you could do that very easily as well. Just really study your reference photo, find out where those intense shadows are, make those your darkest values. The lighter points on your subjects, make those the lighter values on your painting, and you will be good to go. At this point, you're going to want to dry your painting again thoroughly, and if you don't have a heat tool, you can use a blow dryer. I would keep a good distance between the blow dryer and your painting though, and use a lower heat setting. And now we're going to mix up a really thick dark mix you saw there of the Ultramarine and the Piemontite Genuine. And now I'm working on the eye, and this is a really fun technique for you to try. I've moved to a number 6 Trekell brush. And what I'm doing is I'm doing negative painting to create her eyelashes. So what I'm doing is I'm leaving some white space between the eyelid and the eye, and I'm just making little eyelashes from the pupil that cross that white space and end at the eyelid. And you can really see it here on this eye that I'm doing now. And then don't forget to leave a highlight. If you do forget to leave a highlight and you end up just painting this whole area black, don't worry about it. What you can do is go in later with some white gouache or with some bleed-proof white and add that highlight and eyelashes in. This is just kind of a way to do it without having to go back in later. And as with all things in watercolor, once you work on one space and finalize some detail, you will notice that another area needs some finalization as well. So now that we've got her eyes in, which is a huge personality point, then you can really see, because now she's going to be looking back at you and saying, hey, you forgot to do this. So what she was telling me is I need a little more detail on her snout. Now that she has her eyes and nose complete, we can go in and look at some final details on the ears. I'm using a Trekell Protégé series. This is a number 6. It's an imitation Kolinsky sable. I really like this brush because it has such a wonderful fine point, and I like the amount of liquid it holds. I like the amount of water it holds. Sometimes when you've got a detail brush, they hold an awful lot of water. I wanted to use brushes in this one that were really at a pretty good price point. Princeton Neptune is always really approachable, and these Protégé brushes from Trekell are very, very nice. They're easy to use, they hold just the right amount of water, and for a point, for detail, they really are wonderful. Now it is time to add some shadow. Now this always looks ugly at first. It always looks more intense than it needs to be. I've got, looks like a mix of that Piemontite Genuine or a very thick version of it and just a tad bit of Ultramarine. I want the shadow to be the darkest right up against the pig, because whenever you are looking at anything, you will notice that the shadow is always darkest right where that object hits the ground, right at that line. And then the shadow will dissipate in the direction that the light is coming from, or is that opposite direction? It's kind of like saying easterly wind. I always have to think that means that the wind is coming from the east, right? Yes. I always get confused by those things, which is so funny because I'm very good with directions, with cardinal directions. But anyway, now let's go in and get more of that Quin Gold, and we'll just use that to disperse the paint where I laid down for the shadow. I wanted to go back to my Mottler brush as well, because now I can have more breadth, more width to create form in that shadow. So with my number 8 round, I'm tapping in more concentrated dots of pigment, but with that Mottler brush, I can go back in and very roughly and use very painterly strokes to pull that shadow down and let it blend. So you can see here I'm adding more of the pigment to the base of the pig, and then I went in with the Mottler brush and some of the gold to help bring the light in, reflect it back up to the pig. Don't forget to leave some white space because those kinds of things really add texture. And speaking of texture, let's go ahead and add those little textural elements onto her lip. I'm not sure what those little bumps are called on her lip. I know dogs have them too. I don't know what they're called on dogs either. If anyone knows, leave me a comment because that's always interesting to learn something new. If I ever make it on the game show Jeopardy, I will be able to answer that question. What are those bumps on a pig's lip called? I don't know. At this point, I'm really just cleaning up the palette. I'm going in with whatever greens are left, using that brush to just turn it around, tap it in, going wet on wet, wet into damp, really trying to get a lot of textural elements in that pig's environment. And as you're doing this, you just always want to be looking to assess what's happening in your painting. I tried to keep the darkest values away from the pig and that gold towards her body and face, because what that did is it helped bring that light up to her and kind of put her in the spotlight. But what I also noticed is that I am in need of some lighter pinkish brown. So I'm taking my bleed-proof white and I'm mixing just a little bit of the paint in my palette on there. And let's see what we can come up with here for the highlights on those lip bumps. I'm still using that Trekell brush for the highlights, and I did add just a slight highlight along the ridge of her left ear, the one on our right. But that's totally optional. You don't have to do that. I'm using a heat tool to remove the tape, even though it's washi tape and very low tack. I really recommend doing that. It will tear your paper at some point. You will always find something that tears your paper. There's a lot of little tricks you can do to repair paper. I saw someone get the back of a metal spoon wet and kind of press that paper back down. But I believe in avoiding the tears in the first place. And for me, that is using a heat tool to remove the washi tape. Pull your tape off at a 90-degree angle like this and heat the area just above where you are pulling or just ahead of where you are pulling. Then you will find that it is much easier to remove the tape and preserve the quality of your paper underneath. So keep that in mind. Use a heat tool when you're removing the tape. Do be careful when you're using a heat tool to help you remove your washi tape or painter's tape, whatever it is you're using, because you really can burn yourself on those things. I'm playing with some mattes here. I have this pink matte. It's one of the mattes that I have left over that I just can't use for anything, and I really don't like it with the pig, and I don't like this taupe color one either. It's damaged to boot, so I'm not really sure what I want to do with a matte so far. I will link to these in the description because I got them from Amazon and I really like them, and that off-white does absolutely nothing for me, and of course the orange won't work. These are just all I have left of the 8x10 size. Now you'll see, if you can see, I've already signed the pig down in the lower right there. And all of these mats come with a backing. They come with a cello bag to display them. It's very easy to frame. You just position your painting behind the mat, and then I flip it over and just use artist tape on the back. You can create a hinge, or you can just tape it down, however you want to do it. And then you put it up against the backing and place all of that. You don't even have to put the package together. Just place all three of those layers in your frame and you're good to go. The pink might work. I don't know. What do you guys think? Leave me a note in the comments. I know everybody's monitor looks differently, but leave a note in the comments if you like the pink. Since I signed it down below and the mat will cover that up, you know, I might have to re-sign it, which is fine. I've done that to my paintings before. Or I could leave it like it is. It's only going to stay in my home. But I really don't like that off-white. At any rate, lots you can do. I can leave it just like it is and just take it to a framer and have them frame it. But I really love that nice white border that comes from using tape around the edge. Well, here she is. If you can't make it to a petting zoo or a farm tour, anything like that, you can certainly bring that farm right home to you. Let me know in the comments what you think of this painting. What do you think we should name her? I think she needs a name. She has a very content smile on her face, and she's quite the little piggy princess. She's not little at all. She really looks like she weighs about 400 pounds. At any rate, everyone have a wonderful day. I so appreciate you hanging out with me. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Bye now.